All right, let's just dive right in. And yeah, you read that title correctly. This isn't a joke. We're actually going to break down how you can scientifically turn a regular roll of toilet paper into real, high-proof, drinkable alcohol. I know it sounds absolutely nuts, but the chemistry behind it, it's surprisingly solid.
So this whole wild idea started from a place of pure scientific curiosity. The person behind this just got hooked on a thought. Paper comes from plants, right? And plants have sugar. So, could you somehow unlock that hidden energy? This quote right here is about that moment when a crazy what if turned into a real mission.
Okay, so that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, how on earth do you do that? It seems impossible. You can't just throw a piece of paper in a bucket and expect it to ferment. The secret, the thing that makes this whole process possible, is hidden in what paper's made of at the molecular level.
And here it is, the big reveal. Paper is pretty much all cellulose. And what's cellulose? Well, it's just a super long, really tough chain of glucose molecules. You know, sugar. It's the exact same stuff that makes up our cotton clothes or the wood in our furniture. The sugar is right there, hiding in plain sight. It's just locked up in a way that yeast can't get to. So the challenge isn't about making sugar, it's about setting it free.
So, with the basic idea figured out, it was time to map out a plan. How do you actually break those chemical bonds and get to the glucose? This wasn't going to be a simple one-step thing. It was going to take a carefully planned chemical attack.
To crack open that cellulose, there were really two main options on the table. You could go with a kind of brute force chemical attack, or you could try a more delicate biological approach. Let's check out the pros and cons of each. You know, this really came down to a simple trade-off. The chemical method, it's fast for sure, but it leaves you with this gnarly soup of acid and sugar that's a huge pain to separate. The enzyme method, on the other hand, is slower, but it's way cleaner, and for this project, clean and simple one out. The enzyme route was the way to go.
And this is the hero of the story, cellulase. The best way to think about it is like a team of tiny microscopic scissors. It's not just one thing, it's a whole crew of different enzymes that all work together. They find those long cellulose fibers, grab on, and just start snipping them apart, over and over until all you have left is simple glucose that yeast can eat.
Okay, theory time is over. Let's get into the actual process. We've got our raw material, toilet paper, and we've got our tool, cellulose. Now we're going to walk through the actual conversion, turning that fluffy paper into a sugary liquid that's all ready for fermentation. First things first, before our enzyme scissors can do their job, the toilet paper needs a little persuasion. It gets simmered in a solution of sodium hydroxide, which is basically drain cleaner. Sounds pretty intense, I know, but it's a super important step to weaken the paper's tough structure.
So why bother with this chemical bath? Well, it does three really important things. 1, it pulls the cellulose fibers apart. 2, it chops them into smaller pieces. And 3, this is the big one, it creates way more open ends for the enzymes to latch onto. You're basically roughing up the paper to make it an easy target.
All right, with the paper pulp all prepped and rinsed, it is time for the magic to happen. The pulp goes into this special buffer solution that keeps the pH right at 5, the perfect little hot tub environment for our cellulase enzymes to work. Then the enzymes go in, and the whole concoction gets put in an oven at 50 degrees Celsius for 2 whole days. That gives our molecular scissors plenty of time to do their thing and chop up all that cellulose into sugar. After those 2 days, we have a sugar solution. Now it's finally time to make some alcohol. Brewer's yeast is added, and almost right away, within a day, the whole thing is bubbling like crazy with CO2. That's the sign that the yeast is having a feast. And what's really cool is that even when the bubbling slows down, the cellulase is still in there, quietly breaking down any bits of paper that are left. After 2 weeks, the party's over. The bubbling stops, the sugar's gone, and what we have now is alcohol. So, at this point, we've basically made a weak toilet paper wine, but we're not aiming for wine. We need to get that alcohol out. That brings us to the final and maybe most important stage, distillation, the ancient art of using heat to separate and concentrate alcohol. And here's the real challenge we're up against. The liquid we made was only about 2% alcohol. That means the goal here is to carefully pull out that tiny 2% of ethanol from the other 98% of water it's mixed with. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. The first distillation run was a huge success. It concentrated the liquid by a factor of 10, all the way up to 20% alcohol. Much better, but we're not done yet.
This is really where distillation becomes an art form.
When you redistill that 20% solution, you don't just collect everything in one big jug. You make what are called cuts. The very first stuff to come out, the heads, has some harsh chemicals you don't want. The very last stuff, the tails, can be watery and bitter. The sweet spot is right in the middle, the hearts. That's the good stuff, the clean, pure ethanol. Knowing when to make those cuts is the secret to any good spirit.
So, after all that, after all the chemistry, the simmering, the fermenting, the double distilling, and making those careful cuts, what did we end up with? Let's take a look at the final numbers.
The final product clocked in at a jaw-dropping 64% alcohol by volume. That is 128 proof. This wasn't some weak homebrew anymore. This was a legitimate, high-proof spirit right up there with the stuff you'd find on a store shelf. But maybe even more impressive than the final proof was the efficiency, 75%. Think about that. That means 3/4 of all the cellulose in that toilet paper was successfully turned into pure ethanol. That is a shockingly high number.
But of course, there's one last all-important test. How did it taste? Well, the final verdict was, it wasn't bad at all. The creators said it basically tasted like a generic neutral alcohol. Maybe a little bitter from some of the tails getting in, but totally drinkable. The crazy experiment worked. It was a complete success.
In the end, an experiment like this just kind of changes how you look at the world, you know? If you can make moonshine from toilet paper, what about that cotton t-shirt you're wearing? Or the wooden table you're sitting at? It makes you wonder, what other common stuff around us is secretly just a bundle of locked-up energy, just waiting for someone to find the right key?